So let's start with this.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pain for a long-term gain.
So short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers. We may have to deal with that in the short term. Short-term and temporary.
Temporary, short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Short-term pain.
We have to focus on the short-term.
Short-term.
Short-term, 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 and long-term.
Short-term.
Hopefully this is a short-term pain. Short-term is highly outweighed of the long-term benefits.
Some short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
What the fuck are they talking about? What is the long-term gain? Okay, so it's energy. If you don't like the word demonic, I'm just going to say use the word entropy. Okay, sort of the same thing in this scenario. What are they talking about the long-term gain? These people that are running, these Alex Karp people and Netanyahu and the baby eaters and all these people, they're demonic. So you sit here and go, this is why nobody understands, like the market isn't even down that much, right? All these people think that this is just going to go away. And the reason, if you followed me for a while, I was going to do this thing yesterday on Armageddon, but I decided not to do it because I just didn't want to like pile on like more, terrifying imagery and so forth. So I just like let the water flow down underneath the bridge. But if you go listen to that guy, the Mizrahi perspective, he's an Arabic Jew, and he's looking at this in a long-term historical viewpoint. And of course, the Iranians in my lifetime, have always been portrayed as these wacko, crazed killers that just want to sit around and blow up coffee shops and so forth. And they're an absolutely brilliant, religious, 6,000-year-old civilization. And all they did was just drop a couple of missiles around a couple of places and take radar and interrupt the flow of oil. And my point to you is that's never going to go back the way it was. If Iran would have blown up all of the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, then taken oil which they can do at any time, understand it. At any time they can take the price of oil, they can just shut off all the oil, all the energy. If you listen to that guy, the Mizrahi report, what he's saying is that in 7 days, the West's influence in the Gulf region, in particular the Gulf states, has almost come to an end. In 7 days. What I'm hearing, and what you're probably hearing too, is there's appears to be sort of a law. Sorry, leaf blower. I think there's going to be a law in the Gulf region, and they're going to turn more towards Israel, and they're just going to pepper Israel with cluster munitions for weeks on end. It won't make a lot of casualties. The property damage will be unfathomable. So energy is how to think about anything. Now, so there's this guy, Mark Faber. You don't hear him. He's pretty old now. He's 80 years old, lives in Thailand. And I've always been a big fan of his. He wrote a book called Tomorrow's Gold. It's about the rise of Asia. It's not really about gold. It's about Asia. It's not a great title, but he does this little thing, which I think you should think about right now, and especially when you're thinking about your investments. This isn't an argument to say that the stock market's going to collapse and all that. But when you say that the price of oil went to, or the price of gold, let's do the price of gold, it's at 5,000, right? So you say it takes $5,000 to buy an ounce of gold. We'll invert the thing. Like in chemistry class, when you had to invert things, instead of thinking about gold and price in terms of dollars, price the dollars in terms of gold. For example, just do this in your head. On 9/11, the price of gold was about $270. So with 10 grand, you could have bought about 40 ounces of gold. Now you can buy 2 with 10 grand. And that's how you have to think about oil. What's happening with oil? The net worth of Russia just doubled over the weekend because of the increase in the price of oil. Your portfolio, people are like, well, it's short-term pain for some long-term gain. Well, your portfolio just went down 50% versus the price of oil. I don't have the numbers, but a long time ago, 20 years ago, I don't know. I think I heard this from Mark Faber, and I sat down one day and I calculated how much oil you could buy in the year 2000 if you had $100,000 of GE stock. And it was, price of oil was only $18 a barrel, thereabouts. And the dividend of, if I remember right, GE, when I first got in the business, I think it had a dividend yield of almost 5%. It was seen as like a big blue chip industrial, almost like a giant utility. So if you had, let's see if I can do the math in my head. So if you had 100 grand, it's paying 5%, you get $5,000 a year. That's, let's just for fun say it's $500 a month, and you could buy a $20 oil. You could buy whatever that is. How many, that's, 40 barrels of oil with a dividend. Well, now you can buy like, the dividend of GE has been cut and then cut again and then cut. I think it almost went to zero. But what I'm trying to say is what's coming in America's realization is the worst thing that Trump and his crazed child rapist gangsters around him could have done right now is to incite inflation. I don't know how they're going to keep the bond market together. I don't know who the fuck is going to keep buying treasury or U.S. treasuries at 4% if the price of oil stays over 100. They don't even have to take, the Iranians don't even have to take the price of oil to 250. Just having it sit at $100. You're going to start thinking about finances differently, whether you want to or not, for these reasons I'm telling you. I think I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about Americans need to think a lot more about hard assets. The whole investment thesis has been about AI, right? You can go look at that story yourself. How are they going to run the AI? Korea has 9 days of liquid natural gas. Korea, where all the chips are made. The chips aren't made here, right? The SK Hynix makes the chips that are sold with an NVIDIA brand. They're not made here. They're made in Korea and they're made in Taiwan. The energy thing has just changed the whole this whole AI, trillions and trillions and trillions. Trump has that whole thing is over because of $100 oil. Think about on the other side. All these Gulf states, these like sort of pseudo states, they have no water, they have no food, they have no rivers, they have nothing. They just export energy and they have U.S. military bases. And Iran just said, okay, let's just, bing, 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 we'll just hit a couple tanks. We won't annihilate the thing. This is why it was well received. I did a piece on Friday called Parlay, like the pirate thing in Pirate of the Caribbean. We're not going to just blow everybody off the fucking desert, off the face of the earth. But think of what it's like at the Gulf states now that they can't export oil the same way, but they had all this commitment to Trump for all these hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars. That's over. I mean, just think of it in your own mind, like, what did Trump do when he was elected? He just flew to the Gulf states and just started collecting money for AI. That's over. That whole thesis is gone over the weekend. It's just not there anymore. OpenAI has no fucking revenue. They're putting $100 billion into it. Nobody's paying for it. They're not going to be at the cost of building and maintaining these giant data centers is the calculus on that has all just changed because of the price of energy. They have no conception of energy because they are effectively demonic. That's my theme to you. Whether you don't like the word demonic, just say entropy. Like, who's doing the calculus of a massive attack in Iran in the early stages of 2026? I think there is a reasonable conspiracy that this is all planned and that the real people behind all this want the price of oil to be much higher. But just for fun.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers. We may have to deal with that in the short term. Short-term and temporary.
I just want to be clear about this. These crazy fucking people that run the United States and Israel believe that they were going to bomb Iran and steal all its energy, just like they rape children. They're like, they really don't live in the real world. They thought that they were going to drop a couple bombs and kill the Ayatollah, and so we're going to get that oil and gas, and then we're going to go do the same thing to Russia, and then China's next. These are insane, demonic, wacko people running the Western world, and that's what the Mizrahi perspective just explained. Is that because of it, the rest of the world is no longer going to look at America as like the land of Madonna and Prince and Coca-Cola. They're just going to look at, you can hear it all over social media. Everybody around the world is saying Iran is fighting the Epstein class. There's no long-term gain coming out of this, people. The whole principal idea of the war on terror was this is just an amplification of this Libya, Iraq, Syria, then Somalia, Afghanistan. They're just going to rake the earth. I call it 7 million people versus 7 billion. The world just got a lot smaller. The world just got, thank God we do have, so much food and energy in this crisis. But my big theme to you today is you're going to stop thinking about these bullshit trillions and $25 trillion of the software stocks. That's over. Those stocks are not worth $25 fucking trillion. They want you to believe in sort of a weird religious way that AI is going to sort of make this world of like, what's the Merle Haggard song? Free bubble up and rainbow stew. That AI, they're just going to build all these data centers like the size of small cities, and this like it was going to print food and like it's demonic. It's all they're doing is burning up what's energy that North America has left. A data center works like this. There's a jet engine connected to a generator, connected to racks and racks and racks and racks and racks of servers burning at full capacity. The fastest, most heat-intensive thing that NVIDIA could ever come up with, running wide open 24/7. That's the plan. That's the AI plan right there. The whole financial infrastructure of that has just been completely blown apart by this rise in energy prices. And what I'm trying to get at is I'm not just piling on with like apocalyptic language. I'm trying to get you to see that what we've done, what the Trump administration has done from the AI, all the intensity of investment in AI to the now Iran war, is it's massively entropic, just like a black hole of energy. Which leads me, let me wind down by saying just a couple more.
Very short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain. Short-term pain. We have to focus on the short term.
Short term.
Short term.
Short term. Short.
I mean, it is funny to listen to over and over again. All right. Here's why our Arabic Jewish friend Mizrahi is so brilliant in his analysis. Not only has the U.S. Navy been sort of weakened in the Gulf to some degree, the radars have been weakened in the Gulf. The offloading of the oil facilities have been weakened, just impaired. We don't have to say they've been completely wiped out, and that's what they're going for, that this is all going to cure itself. What really has happened is the connection between the dollar and energy is now in nobody knows. Nobody knows. A week ago, the president of the United States could sort of control the price of oil. Now he can't. I would say the guy in charge of the price of energy right now is Putin, which means you have to think completely different about what the US dollar really is now. Again, this is not like doom and gloom. The dollar's going to zero. We're all going to die. The lights are going to go out. That's not the thing. But the thesis of like what to invest in, we've spent the whole last 18 months. The only thing anybody talks about is AI. AI is burning through the energy at just picture a pile of, you've seen these pictures of like what $1 trillion looks like. It's like, I don't know, 20 football fields filled with pallets of $100 bills. You ever seen those pictures? Just imagine that on fire. That's what AI has turned into now. I think the lights went out in Tel Aviv last night, by the way. Again, more entropy. There is no long-term gain from bombing Persia. It just isn't there. Now, lastly, let me tell you something, Linda. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not going to say this like the Bitcoin people do. But I think the thesis for Ethereum is still very strong, even though the price is so low. I'm not making an argument you should run out and buy Ethereum. Just hear me out. When they went through the proof of, I've been making content about blockchain now for like 5 years. And one of the biggest things that happened is they went from proof of stake, proof of work, which is what Bitcoin is, to proof of stake. And they dropped the energy usage by like 97%. Bitcoin's still, they've improved it a good bit, but it's still horribly energy inefficient, right? Like AI is. What I'm getting at is Ethereum has worked the energy problem, has worked the privacy problem better than Meta, Oracle, TikTok, where we all know we're being surveilled all the time. Its business model isn't surveillance like all these, like the big Mag 7 are. It's increasingly being used. Almost certainly it's going to be used in the new stock exchanges that are being built in Texas. It's increasingly going to be used in securities. That's sort of what our forte is here. And nobody really understands that. But hold on, it gets worse. It actually gets better. So the supply and demand of Ethereum looks like this. There's only like 100 million of them, but half of them are staked. What I'm getting at is, if you think of what the US dollar was for the last 80 years since the war, end of World War II, it was the currency that connected best to the energy. That's why they call it the petrodollar. Okay, see where I'm going with this? I could make an argument right here. I mean, is gold really like a reserve asset? Yes, it is. That's absolutely. If you look at the holdings of gold of all the central banks around the world have been adding to gold at a furious rate for the last 15 years. Well, the Federal Reserve, went from $700 billion on its balance sheet to $7 trillion. That's a 10x. I could sit here and say, like, don't even think of Ethereum like as an investment. Like, I'm going to buy it because it's going to go up 5x. I could actually sit here and make an argument that like Ethereum might be more like a reserve asset, like a reserve currency. Lastly, just think of what currency really means. Like a current, right? I'm not insulting your intelligence. I'm just thinking out loud. So, I mean, there's one guy, I think from some Morgan Stanley, somebody came out and said that the volume, the current of Ethereum could go up 10x, like the usage, the turnover of it, of Ethereum could go up 10x in 2026. And there's only 100 million of them, and half of them are staked, which means there's really only in play 50 million. And it's not an asset based on violence like the dollar has become. The price of oil and the dollar thing now is just all missiles and cluster bombs, right? It's not even really, it's like a war game thing. And what does our friend, the hat's over there, I'm not going to get up and get it as I usually do. And what does our friend, Mr. Alex Karp, tell us that AI is really for? The kill chain. That's all they got, people. All they got is violence. It's the Epstein class. All they have, I mean, they made a movie out of it where they captured the screams of children and showed it to our kids. It was called Monsters, Inc. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I would look for more regime change in Israel than I would in Iran. I would look for a kind of regime change coming to the United States that's going to be more and more focused on the governors. I don't know if it's going to be because of energy prices or inflation or ICE agents or AI or a false flag or whatever. But I think you're going to wake up one day and really you're going to look more at your local governor than you will to Trump and his gang of assholes. They're just gangsters. They're just gangsters. They're just the Epstein class. And really, what's going to keep the lights on, pun intended, I think is increasingly going to be your governors. And that may have some sort of state of emergency. Again, I don't know if it's climate, or the lights go out, or they are talking about maybe just blowing up the whole island where Iran exports 90% of its oil, and the price of oil goes to 250. I don't know even I don't even know if there would be a price of oil, because there would be so many people on Earth that like billions of people would not have access to oil. I don't even know what the price of that looks like. Follow me? So, trying to like to shift Asian buyers away from the region. Canadian LNG expansion currently, and everybody makes them well positioned to fill the void. It's starting to make sense why Trump wants to take over Canada. Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. I think our whole understanding of energy is moving away from this imperial Gulf states, Bahrain, Fifth Fleet, the U.S. Navy, and it's all coming. It's being nationalized. It's more of a national kind of a thing. So we have very, 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 very different dynamics in finance. The key thesis here is I think we've moved away over the weekend from the NASDAQ thesis. AI, software, it's all anybody talks about. It's all the economic growth was based on AI, all the government spending, all the cash flow of the big companies, of the top companies. The money therefore available for share buybacks is now in question. And with the explosion of the energy prices, we're all gonna walk around. We're gonna sound like Mark Faber and Jim Rogers. You're gonna be thinking about it. There's a lot of positive things to say. North America is a very, very, very rich natural resource place to be. There's nowhere else to go from that standpoint. But we have 3% published inflation. I think it's more like 5 or 6, but that's a stupid argument. Everybody has their private, like, Idaho kind of conspiracy of what the inflation rate really is. But we don't really know how anything's to be valued and then that just changed in a week. So we're going to do more and more market-based stuff. We're going to be rolling out some new products and services. I talked about it on Saturday on All Business. And we're here this week in San Diego to turn the lights on to an investment company. Probably be done on Wednesday.
Term and long-term.
Short-term.
Hopefully, this is a short-term pain. Short-term is highly outweighed of the long-term benefit.
It's just terrifying to know that all those people, I don't know if they send out a memo or how this works, but you've seen these other things before, right? All the COVID stuff, ivermectin, like all these parroting things. Joe Rogan has done a couple of them where it's like 40 screens and everybody says the exact same thing. It's terrifying to see that we live in groupthink. That's my theme for you today on the financial side. The financial markets have no fucking idea what's going on. If they were to hit that island with a missile where 90% of the Iranian oil comes out, I don't even know how the stock market works. I don't even know I don't even know how they keep it on. So we are at, let's do some market caps. Just a reminder, Ethereum's $245 billion market cap. That's a tiny. Apple is 3.8 trillion. Google's 3.7 trillion. Meta's 1.63 trillion. Microsoft's 3 trillion. Amazon's 2.3 trillion. Tesla's still at 1.5 trillion, even though it's slowly going out of business. And Nvidia is worth 4.4 trillion. Palantir is worth 375 billion. That's an interesting pair to think about, isn't it? Palantir and Ethereum. Just mentally, just sort of, or you're playing golf or working out or something, just be like, are they like opposites or something? Yeah. They're like two ideas about technology. One's a kill chain and one's a blockchain. Have a nice day.